All right, so today we're going back in time a little bit, back to the early 1900s, the book publishing world.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of a different landscape back then.
Yeah.
7 out of 8 books lost money for their publishers.
Wow.
Can you imagine?
That's a tough business to be in.
Yeah, that's a lot of flops. And then 1937 comes along, and this little book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, pops up. And it starts with a really small print run, right? Just 5,000 copies.
Yeah.
And then it just explodes, like over 10 million copies sold
So
in 36 languages. It's still a bestseller today. Crazy.
that's amazing. It really makes you wonder what they tapped into there. Like, what was it about this book that just resonated with so many people?
For so long.
That's what we're going to figure out today.
Yeah.
You know, we're always trying to cut through the noise and find those essential pieces of information.
Oh, exactly.
The stuff that you can actually use in your life. So today we're doing a deep dive into this book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. We're going to try to pull out those core principles, those ideas that have just stuck with people for decades. And they really have stood the test of time, haven't they? I mean, Dorothy Carnegie even said as much in the later editions of the book, that those principles are timeless. And, you know, it's still being taught all over the world in Carnegie training courses. That's got to say something.
It really does. So why did this book become such a phenomenon? Well, Dale Carnegie actually realized something pretty interesting. He'd been teaching public speaking for years, and he noticed that what adults really wanted was to know how to get along with each other, like how to interact effectively in everyday life, in their jobs, their relationships, everywhere, more so even than public speaking.
I guess it makes sense when you think about it. We spend so much time learning technical skills, but how much time do we really spend learning how to relate to each other? It's so fundamental.
Yeah. And you know, Carnegie actually looked back on his own life and realized that he hadn't always been the smoothest operator socially when he was younger. He even said he wished he'd had this book 20 years earlier. Imagine the difference.
It makes you think, doesn't it? It just shows that we're all constantly learning and growing in our relationships. And a little guidance can go a long way.
Exactly. And this wasn't just Carnegie's gut feeling either. It was backed up by some pretty serious research. The University of Chicago and the United YMCA schools, they actually spent a good chunk of change and 2 years conducting a survey, trying to figure out what adults really wanted to learn. They went to Meriden, Connecticut, figured it was a pretty typical American community, and they interviewed every single adult there.
Wow. Every adult.
Yeah. They used these huge questionnaires covering everything you could think of, their lives, their goals, their struggles, what they wanted to learn. I mean, they really wanted to get a comprehensive picture of what was going on.
That's a seriously in-depth study. You don't see that kind of commitment to research very often. It makes their findings all the more compelling.
And what did they find? Well, after health. The number one thing adults were interested in was people. Figuring them out, getting along with them, influencing them. It's like this fundamental human need.
It's fascinating, isn't it? We're social creatures at heart. We crave connection and understanding.
Exactly. But here's the kicker. The committee that ran this survey, they couldn't find a single textbook that actually addressed those needs in a practical way. They talked to all the top experts in adult education, and nobody had written the book that these adults were looking for.
So there's a wide open space just waiting for someone to come along and fill it.
And that's where How to Win Friends and Influence People comes in. So our mission today is to dig into this book that stepped up to the plate, to explore some of the core principles that Carnegie laid out for building those strong and effective relationships. We're going to try to give you some actionable takeaways that you can apply to your own life.
Now, we won't be able to cover every single point in the book. It's pretty packed with insights. But we're going to focus on some of the fundamental ideas for connecting with people, influencing them, and building lasting relationships.
All right, so principle number 1. It's pretty straightforward, but also really powerful. Become genuinely interested in other people. Notice the emphasis on the word genuinely here.
Right, it can't be faked. Yeah. You have to actually care about the people you're interacting with.
Absolutely. And Carnegie has a great story about this. It's about a student nurse working in a welfare ward on Thanksgiving Day.
Oh, wow. That's a tough day to be in a welfare ward.
Yeah, it must have been pretty lonely for those patients. And the nurse. She made a point of showing genuine interest in their well-being, even though she didn't have to.
That's really powerful. Just that simple act of caring can make a huge difference in someone's life, especially when they're feeling vulnerable.
Exactly. It's not about being polite or going through the motions. It's about showing real human concern. And it doesn't have to be complicated.
Right.
Carnegie even talks about how a baby smiling in a veterinarian's waiting room can instantly break the ice between strangers.
It's true. There's something so disarming about a baby's smile. It just cuts through all the social awkwardness and reminds us that we're all human beings.
And you know what's even more interesting? Carnegie mentions this phone power program that telephone companies used to have. They actually told their employees to smile while they were talking on the phone.
On the phone, but the other person can't see them.
Exactly. The idea is that even though they can't see it, that smile subtly affects the tone of your voice. It makes you sound more friendly, more approachable.
Wow. It makes you think about how much our internal state affects our communication.
Doesn't it? So principle number 2 is another one that seems simple, but it packs a punch. Smile. Carnegie argues that a smile is this incredibly powerful force. It costs nothing, but it creates so much. It enriches both the person smiling and the person receiving the smile.
I've definitely experienced that. When someone gives me a genuine smile, it just brightens my day a little bit. It creates this instant connection.
It really does.
Yeah.
And Carnegie actually includes a poem in the book about this. It's from a department store ad in New York City about the value of a Christmas smile. It talks about how a smile creates happiness, fosters goodwill in business, and strengthens friendships.
It's beautiful. It captures the essence of what a smile can do.
And it's not just about feeling good. Carnegie talks about this real estate broker who made a conscious effort to smile more. And he found that it dramatically improved his relationships both personally and professionally. He was happier, he connected with people better, it made a real difference.
That's inspiring. It shows that we have the power to change our own outlook and our interactions with others. And sometimes it's as simple as smiling.
Exactly. Okay, principle number 3. This one's all about names. Remember that a person's name is, to that person, the sweetest and most important sound in any language.
Absolutely. There's something so personal about using someone's name. It shows that you see them as an individual, that you value them.
Carnegie tells this amazing story about Jim Farley. He was a key player in Franklin D. Roosevelt's political success. And he had this incredible ability to remember names. He developed a whole system for it. He would learn everything he could about someone. Their full name, their family, their business, even their political views. It was like he built this mental file on everyone he met.
That's impressive. It takes real effort to do that.
It does. And years later, he could still greet them by name, recall personal details, even ask about their prize-winning roses. It's no wonder he built such a strong network of supporters. People felt seen and remembered by him.
It's a powerful reminder that relationships are built on those personal connections, on remembering the little things that matter to people.
And it wasn't just about politicians. Carnegie tells this really touching story about a man named Nicodemus Papadoulos. Everyone just called him Nick. But when someone finally took the time to pronounce his full name correctly, Nicodemus was so moved that he had tears in his eyes. He said in all his years in the country, no one had ever bothered before.
That's heartbreaking. It just shows how much that small act of respect can mean to someone. It's about acknowledging their identity, their whole self.
Okay, principle number 4. This one feels especially relevant today. Be a good listener. Encourage others to talk about themselves.
I think we could all use a little more of that in our lives. In a world that's so focused on self-promotion, just taking the time to really listen to someone is a gift.
Carnegie has this great story about a woman at a bridge party who thought the host was the most interesting conversationalist she'd ever met. But the funny thing is, the host barely said a word. He just listened intently while she talked about her travels, and she was captivated.
It's funny how that works, isn't it? Sometimes the most engaging thing you can do is just shut up and listen. Give the other person your full attention.
Carney called it rapt attention. He said it's the highest compliment we can pay anyone.
He also talks about T.S. Eliot, the poet. Apparently, he was an amazing listener. People felt truly heard after a conversation with him.
Yeah. He didn't just sit there silently. It was this active form of listening. He was completely present, engaged with what the other person was saying.
It makes you think about how you listen. Are you really present in the conversation, or are you just waiting for your turn to talk?
Good point.
Yeah.
And it's not just about adult interactions. Carnegie tells a sweet story about a little boy who realized his mother truly loved him because she would always stop whatever she was doing and listen to him when he wanted to talk.
It's a reminder that we all crave that feeling of being heard from our earliest years. Yeah. It's fundamental to building strong relationships.
And then there's this incredible story about the New York telephone company. They had this customer who was constantly complaining, like really difficult to deal with, cursing at them and everything. But what finally calmed him down, one of their employees, Mr. Detmer, just listened patiently, let the guy vent without interrupting, and guess what? The customer ended up calming down, placing a bigger order, and they even became friends.
Wow. Talk about the power of listening. It can de-escalate even the most heated situations.
Right. It shows that sometimes people just need to feel heard. And when you give them that space to express themselves, it can make all the difference.
And Carnegie himself practiced this principle. He used to write to famous people like General Garfield and General Grant, just asking them to share their experiences and stories.
And they actually wrote back?
I guess everyone likes to talk about themselves a little bit.
Yeah, it seems like it. All right, principle number 5. Talk in terms of the other person's interests. It's about shifting the focus from yourself to what the other person truly cares about.
Makes sense. If you want to connect with someone, you need to speak their language.
Exactly. And Carnegie has this classic example that illustrates this perfectly. It's about Emerson and his son trying to get a calf into the barn.
Oh, I think I've heard this one.
They're pushing and pulling, but the calf is resisting. It just wants to stay in the pasture. Then this Irish housemaid comes along, understands that the calf wants to suckle, puts her finger in its mouth, and gently leads it right into the barn.
So simple, yet so brilliant. It's about understanding what motivates the other person and working with it, not against it.
Carnegie also quotes Harry A. Overstreet, who said that the best way to persuade someone is to first arouse in them an eager want, to make them want what you're offering.
That makes sense. If someone doesn't want something, you're not going to convince them, no matter how hard you try.
Exactly. Even Andrew Carnegie, the steel magnate, realized this. He said the only way to influence people was to talk about what they wanted. He even joked about sending out thank you notes without including the promised payment, expecting people to fill in the blank themselves.
I guess even the most successful people can miss the mark sometimes.
Yeah, but it highlights how important it is to consider the other person's perspective. And then there's this story about Stan Novak and his son Tim. Tim was really dreading starting kindergarten. So instead of forcing him or dismissing his fears, Stan and his wife figured out what might actually excite Tim about school. Things like finger painting and making new friends. They even started finger painting at home to get him excited. And guess what? The next morning, Tim was eager to go.
That's a great parenting strategy. It's about meeting the child where they are and finding ways to make things fun and engaging.
Yeah, it's about understanding their interests and working with them. And Carnegie even shares his own experience negotiating a rent increase. Instead of complaining about what he wanted, he focused on the hotel manager's needs. He explained how a big rent increase might actually hurt the manager in the long run. And guess what? He got a much smaller increase than he expected.
That's a smart tactic.
Yeah.
It's about framing your argument in a way that benefits the other person.
Exactly. He also talks about these terrible business letters that are all about what the sender wants, completely ignoring the recipient. And then he contrasts that with this brilliant letter written by Barbara L. Anderson. She applied for a job at a bunch of banks, and instead of focusing on her own needs, she focused on how she could help the banks achieve their goals.
That's a great approach. Show them what's in it for them.
Yeah, she got interviews at almost every bank she applied to. It's amazing how effective that other-focused approach can be.
It makes you think about how you approach your own communications. Are you focused on yourself or on the other person?
Yeah. And then there's this guy, Mike, who managed to motivate a station manager to clean up his act, not by nagging, but by showing him what a modern, attractive station could look like. He appealed to the manager's desire for a better, more successful station, and it worked.
That's so much more effective than just criticizing. It's about inspiring people to want to do better.
Exactly. And even a college graduate who was struggling to find people to play basketball with realized he needed to shift his approach. Instead of focusing on his own desire to play, he started highlighting what others might enjoy about it. The exercise, the camaraderie, the fun, and suddenly he had people lining up to play.
It all comes back to that same principle. Talk in terms of the other person's interests.
Right. And finally, Carnegie talks about Howard Thurston, the famous magician. Thurston attributed his massive success not just to his skill, but to his genuine interest in his audience. He went on stage feeling grateful for their presence and focused on giving them the best possible show.
That's a great attitude. It's about serving the audience.
Exactly. And even small gestures can make a difference, like a sales representative who took the time to connect with the soda clerks and sales clerks in a drugstore. That genuine interest helped him build relationships at all levels and ultimately retain a valuable account.
It shows that everyone wants to feel seen and appreciated, no matter what their job is.
Absolutely. All right, we've reached principle number 6. Make the other person feel important, and do it sincerely.
That sincerity part is crucial. You can't just fake it.
Carnegie tells this incredible story about a little boy who wrote a heartfelt letter to Kaiser Wilhelm after World War I. The Kaiser was so touched by the boy's genuine admiration that he invited him to visit, and eventually the boy's mother ended up marrying the Kaiser. It's a crazy story, but it shows how powerful it can be to make someone feel genuinely valued.
It's amazing what can happen when you let go of your preconceptions and just connect with someone on a human level.
Yeah. And then there's the Duke of Windsor, who diligently studied Spanish for months before a tour of South America so he could communicate with the people in their own language.
That's impressive. It shows real dedication to building those relationships.
And it's not just about grand gestures. There's this story about Mrs. Rosedale, who stayed loyal to a particular bank for years simply because a teller showed genuine concern for her hospitalized mother.
It's those little acts of kindness that make a lasting impact.
Exactly. And Charles R. Walters secured an important meeting with a busy client just by remembering that his client's son collected stamps. He'd gotten that little detail from the client's secretary.
Wow. It shows how important it is to pay attention to those little details. They can make all the difference.
And then there's this fuel salesman, Naffel. He actually disliked a particular chain store executive, but he needed to win him over, so he did something really clever. He asked for the executive's help with a debate, appealing to his expertise and making him feel important.
That's smart. It's about finding common ground, even with people you might not initially get along with.
Yeah. And let's not forget about the 10-year-old boy in the welfare ward on Thanksgiving. He felt a little bit brighter that day simply because a student nurse took the time to talk to him and make him feel seen.
It's a reminder that everyone needs to feel important, especially when they're going through tough times.
Even Alfred Lunt, the famous actor, admitted that he needed nourishment for his self-esteem. It's a universal need.
We all want to feel appreciated and valued.
And Paul Harvey shared a touching story about Stevie Morse, the blind boy, whose incredible musical hearing was truly celebrated.
It's about recognizing and appreciating the unique strengths and talents in everyone.
All right, so we've explored some of the core principles from how to win friends and influence people. We talked about the power of genuine interest, the importance of smiling, the magic of using names, the art of listening, the strategy of talking in terms of others' interests, and the need to make people feel important. And remember, all of this needs to be done sincerely.
It can't be manipulation.
Yeah,
It has to come from a genuine place of respect and care for others.
absolutely. So now I want you, our listener, to think about which of these principles really resonates with you. Which one could you start applying in your own life today? Maybe just pick one to focus on so you don't get overwhelmed.
That's good advice. Start small and build from there.
And here's something to think about. Think back to your last conversation. How many of these principles did you actually use? And how might that conversation have gone differently if you'd focused on just one more? Maybe observe your interactions in the next few days through the lens of these principles. See what you notice.
You might be surprised by what you discover.
You might. And remember, we've only scratched the surface here. How to Win Friends and Influence People is full of even more valuable insights into building strong and effective relationships. So if you enjoyed this deep dive, I encourage you to check out the book for yourself. It's been helping people connect for almost a century, and its lessons are just as relevant today as they ever were.
It's a timeless classic for a reason.
All right, that's it for today. Until next time, keep those conversations flowing and keep building those connections.
And keep smiling.
Yeah,
You never know who you might brighten up.
you never know.
All right, take care.
See ya.